I don't know what it is about Amphibia, but this show knows how to get the audience fired up and begging to see what's next, and The Court and the King was no exception. We're now able to see the bigger picture clearer than we ever have before, but as one question gets answered, many more pop up in the process. And I'm surprised I've seen so much vitriol towards the root of all evil, dismissing it as filler. And while I get in an alternate universe, we could have had a longer version of The Court and the King, as I do agree its runtime did it a disservice, that doesn't mean that the episode prior was worthless. I don't know. I said before during the Earth arc that it's clear there wasn't much left to do on Amphibia itself beyond Anne and Sasha reconciling, learning of the prophecy, and having the big final battle. Lo and behold, those are the major plot points that have happened thus far, and by the end of this week, we're just about ready to have the final battle. It just gets to a point where plot relevance ends up coming down to the characters I want to see, or the development I want. But with this actively building up to the final battle, writing the episodes off as unimportant is just kind of a reach. The serialization here has been on par with season 2. Why people thought Amphibia was going to switch up at the last second, I have no idea. The finale itself is already going to be long, stretched out over 3 weeks as it starts with Beginning of the End, which goes into the hour-long episode All In, and then ends the following week with the 29-minute episode, The Hardest Thing. So when it comes to the actual finale of the series, we're getting plenty of time. And I'd rather have these episodes where we see the army being assembled rather than just jumping to the finale and all these characters are assembled together without seeing the journey there, as was the case with Adventure Time or Gravity Falls with their final arcs. Alright, mini rant over. Let's break down these episodes for all the details you may have missed. From many details that point to Leif being a planter, to the dark implications of Marcy being held prisoner in her own body. And to stay in the loop with all things Amphibia, please be sure to subscribe to the Roundtable with notifications on so you never miss a video. And this Saturday will also be the Gallery Nucleus Amphibia exhibit, which I'm happy to announce that I will be moderating the panel for. I'm really excited, it's going to be a great time, so if you were able to get tickets, I hope you look forward to setting off the show by looking at some great art and spending some time with the people who help make the show so special. With all that said, let's dive in. Starting with the root of all evil. We open on Andrias' forces continuing to destroy villages and leaving civilians without homes or resources, while Anne and the planters are attempting to recruit more frogs to fight in the resistance. Unfortunately, morale has ran low, as a lot of these villagers don't have the drive to fight against their oppressor. Hop Hop tries to pitch the resistance from an agricultural angle, driving the villagers away even further, causing Polly to shout "Code Blue" at Anne, an obvious reference to Anne's calamity power. Anne tries to rope the villagers back in by promising they could end up looking like Lago, who strikes the same pose as Alex Armstrong from Full Metal Alchemist. Made me laugh, made me smile. A dragonfly drone strikes the wagon, causing the group to crash, and they suddenly awake in strange robes, finding themselves at a new location. Now, I'm assuming more adults than kids are going to get this reference for obvious reasons, but the robes, setting, and all-around vibe of this episode is a parody of the A24 film Midsommar. I don't want to say too much about the film in case anyone's interested in watching it, though I would book a therapy session beforehand. But the frog bashing his head in with a rock, Bessie's flower crown, and the garden catching fire are all very out of context references to the film. Maybe that's why I enjoyed this episode so much more as someone familiar with the movie, and if you haven't seen it, you might just feel kind of lost. It reminds me of how Dexter's Lab had a Die Hard episode when I was growing up, and I did not understand the reference at all. And questions if the resistance really needs plant people, which I think may end up serving as foreshadowing for the final battle. Either something more literal, like the Moss Men joining the fray, or just Hop Hop being vindicated through the characters that we met in this episode, kicking ass in ways Anne never could have predicted. So long story short, it's obvious something is sus with these people, and as it turns out, the villagers are all in a symbiotic relationship with Apothecary Gary, the mind-controlling mushroom from season 1. They feel truly one with nature and excel at gardening with his guidance. Yeah, this is very deranged. After establishing that Andrias is using spores to control the wildlife, it was only a matter of time before Gary reared his head. But I gotta admit, the ways they went about reintroducing him definitely caught me off guard. We also get introduced to some ladybug flamethrower Frobos. And just like how I stated before, that the dark Frobos were a reference to the egg fighters from Sonic Unleashed, these ladybug Frobos seem to be a reference to the egg shooters and the egg flames, the latter of which you can actually grab and use as flamethrowers in the game. They have the exact same color scheme. I refuse to believe this is a coincidence. After teaming up to defeat the Frobos, Hop Hop manages to strike an alliance with Gary and the villagers at Gardenton, meaning the Spores have joined the resistance. I truly did not expect this development whatsoever. It's kinda wild, but I kinda love it. And also questions Gary on Andrias' mind-controlling collars, to which Gary proposes the idea that this serves as confirmation that he's not the only mind-controlling mushroom around. Which I suppose makes sense. This mushroom could be held prisoner underneath the castle just like the Mossman and the Shadowfish. I imagine spores and the whole hive mind aspect were important for developing the core in the first place. And with new allies and new comfy robes, the episode comes to a close. Before we continue into the main event, it's time for our fan spotlight.
Now I find myself in the wild unknown with the frogs and toads, and I'm far from home. But there's so much here to discover. One leap after another. Hop into the adventure, gotta rivet, jump on it.
Don't you think it's time to say goodbye to those childhood friends of yours?
The Core and the King was the big flashback episode we've been waiting for, showing us in detail how the Calamity Box was stolen under King Andrias' watch. And I just gotta say, even with the limited time they had, they did a great job showing just how complex Andrias' position in particular is. He's not just a tyrant, he's clearly not even on board with the extremes of the Newtopia Empire, at least in his youth. But he's led to believe that these invasions are a necessary evil in order to upkeep their way of life in Amphibia. His father Aldrich is, well, his Sasha. Seasons 1 and 2 Sasha, that is. Constantly in his ear and manipulating his worldview so that he'll fall in line and go with whatever Aldrich thinks is best. And with Leif's stake and everything coming down to something only she saw, it makes sense that Andrias would be caught between a rock and a hard place. A 22-minute runtime would have helped us connect with Barrel and Leif more, buying into their friendship with Andrias a lot more, and overall just really marinate in the emotions. But I do think the final product still pulled off fleshing out Andrias enough that we finally understand his motives and actions on a deeper level. That being said, we open at the castle where Darcy is fiddling with Marcy's cell phone, taking it apart piece by piece in order to study the technology. I love how the core's hollow, octopus-like body is still in the chamber. Kinda makes me think that once Marcy is freed, we'll get to see that monstrosity in action. It makes sense for Darcy to become familiar with Earth's technology as a means of preparation, but considering they wrote it off as pathetic, I think they're greatly underestimating humanity as, it's a cell phone, dude. It's not the most impressive thing on the planet, especially as far as technology goes, which I think is intentional. The hive mind of the core believes that Amphibia and its newts are superior. In their eyes, nothing or no one else can compare. That ego will be instrumental in their undoing. As we speculated back when Olivia and Yunan aired, Darcy is short for Dark Marcy, as the name appeals to them. This is one of many instances that show us how the core inhabiting Marcy's body is causing the core to adopt a lot of her quirks and personality traits, embracing teenage angst through their name. Craving red velvet cupcakes with ube frosting? Sounds delicious. And of course, her clumsiness. And they clarify that yes, Marcy is trapped within the hive mind. If I had to guess, she's either enduring a nightmare or a Mabelland-esque dream. But either way, it's likely an extension of what we saw in Olivia and Yunan. Marcy is caught in a simulation where she can be with Anne and Sasha forever, whether that means being tormented by her mistakes or blinded by a fantasy where they get to party all day and go on adventures until the sun doesn't shine. Darcy wants to optimize his body further, declaring they need to purge Marcy's mind of any redundant memories, which has some terrifying implications. Redundant is defined as not or no longer needed or useful, which means Marcy's memories of Anne, Sasha, her parents, her interests, her whole life, it could all be in jeopardy. But at the same time, I think it makes sense for the core to hold on to Marcy's memories of her friends, so it'll be easier to manipulate them during their inevitable confrontation. It's also complicated because I feel like so many of Marcy's smarts and skills are intrinsically tied to her interests. Video games, fanfics, trivia, and lore that she's translated into useful information. What can be purged that wouldn't ultimately set back the core's full potential under the Darcy persona? Just some food for thought. After stumbling upon the torn portrait of himself, Barrel and Leif, Andrias flashes back to the golden age of Amphibia. Young Andrias being voiced by Zeno Robinson, who's just becoming an absolute superstar in the voiceover world. I mean, aside from his extensive anime portfolio, he also voices Hunter on the Owl House and Remy on Big City Greens. As Andrias picks up his painting and goes about his business, we can see holograms sprinkled throughout the city as previously depicted in true colors. Aside from imagery of Andrias and Aldrich, there's a conquer counter that presumably reflects the number of worlds that Amphibia has taken over, informing us that there are a total of 5. Which is interesting because the amount of planets connected to Amphibia within the Calamity book in the episode A Day at the Aquarium was indeed 5. However, one of these included Earth, so either this counter is factoring in Amphibia itself, or the total number of planets they conquered simply weren't illustrated in the book. There's also propaganda that reads, "Conquer worlds, secure our future," which again enforces the idea that invading other worlds is a necessary evil. It's definitely not. We see that Barrel the Brave was actually one of 2 guards of Warhammers. I wonder where the other went, but at the same time, I imagine these Warhammers may have been common weapons for toads before the resources to create them dwindled as the invasions ceased. Barrel the Brave is voiced by Jason Ritter, Dipper on Gravity Falls, which means Stan, Mabel, and Dipper have now all appeared in Amphibia through the Curator, Belle of the Bellhop, and now Barrel. The trilogy is complete. Barrel also apparently keeps count of every time he beats Andrias in sparring, which is evidently a lot. Considering how this all ends, it makes sense why Andrias would become petty and take personal offense to the tiniest of losses, such as Marcy beating him in Flipboard. The note from Leif that Barrel hands Andrias reads, "I'm in the garden working on a surprise. Signed, L." Cute. Meeting Leif at the garden, we finally get acquainted with the pink frog up close and personal. To which, there really should be zero doubts that she's a planter at this point. For starters, she summoned Andrias and Barrel because she wanted to perform a new dance she perfected. The planter ritual dance from Anne Hunter, capable of mesmerizing any creature. Which, not only did Sprig perform, but Anne later used after being prompted to do so by a floating Sprig head. Which claimed to likely be a stress-induced hallucination, but come on, a blue glow? That was the work of the Calamity power, and you still can't convince me otherwise. Actually, with Leif making significant contact with the box later in the episode, it would make sense that she imprinted on it in a way where Anne's power guided her to this decision because of Leif. Andrias blushes and looks away during Leif's dance, implying he has some special feelings towards her, whereas Barrel is entranced right alongside the Mossmen, who are collared and chained up. It's eerie how chill everyone is with the imprisonment of the Mossmen, as clearly Amphibia frowns upon such a thing in present day. But it goes to show how normalized and ingrained into Amphibia's culture all of these horrible practices were. They were living under the false belief that their society would crumble otherwise. The portrait Andrias got for his friends is meant to celebrate his greatest accomplishment yet, being assigned to lead the next invasion. Shortly after, Andrias encounters his father, King Aldrich, voiced by William Houston, who also played King Vendrick in Dark Souls 2. Vendrick was actually the inspiration for King Andrias, so his casting here brings everything full circle in a really cool way. Aldrich plants the idea in Andrias' head that it's time to let go of his childhood friends. Yes, that line from the season 3 teaser. Believing that Leif and Barrel will only begin to exploit Andrias due to his newfound position of power once he becomes king. After introducing Andrias to the core, Aldrich reveals which planet Andrias is going to invade. And surprise, surprise, now we know why Andrias is so hellbent on invading Earth. Because it was the planet he was meant to invade thousands of years ago. and this is a mission that is meant to leave no survivors, slaughtering the entire human race alongside Earth's animals, in order to properly mine its resources. At this point in time, Earth is also said to be in the medieval era, and Leif did indeed bring the Calamity Box to Vikings, as depicted on the pot. Leif as a name was not only common during the Norse ages, but various meanings include descendant and life. Descendant could be due to her all but confirmed ties to the planter family, while life ties into her conflict as she betrays Andrias in order to protect the lives of those in Amphibia, on Earth, and in the multiverse as a whole. Leaf, of course, also sounds like leaf as in the plant appendage, like the leaves in Anne's hair. Although she doesn't have any direct link to the Calamity Stones, as I once speculated, she still very much represents so many important themes and elements of the series. Andrias is handed the key to the music box, which also unlocks the chamber it's held in. Sneaking his friends into the room, they pal around and use the box to play a game of catch, against Andrias' wishes, leading to Leif mistakenly activating the stones, which give her a series of horrible premonitions. Leif foresees the ruined, destroyed state of Amphibia after Andrias began to mine it for resources, taken directly from the episode Olivia and Union, except with Leif superimposed over the footage. She is then shown a glimpse of the Calamity Box atop of its podium, creaking open slowly as the 3 gems glow. While this could just be a generic shot of the box without deeper meaning, a part of me wonders if this is a glimpse into a future we haven't seen yet, the moment Anne returns the powers of the Calamity Box to Sasha and Marcy. Next, we see a panning shot of the dark mural Grime and Sasha stumbled upon in true colors, revealing to Leif that Andrias is destined to become a tyrant, with the fate of the box resting on 3 humanoid girls. There's then flashes of something that has to be from the final battle, or at least its aftermath, as Newtopia Castle lies in ruin. Not only does the castle itself appear to be completely eviscerated, but there's also a mountain of Andrias' robots destroyed, primarily Frobos. I absolutely believe this is the condition Newtopia Castle will be left in after Anne, Marcy, and Sasha absolutely demolish Andrias' army. Leif then sees the castle arising from the ground beneath, as shown in true colors, followed by the prophecy of the Calamity Trio, standing up against a representation of what Amphibia has succumbed to. And then this gets terrifying, as we can see what we can only assume to be the red moon that looms above Amphibia, hurtling towards the planet at a rapid pace, Majora's Mask style. Leif has witnessed the end of Amphibia itself. As for why the moon is colliding into the planet, I suspect that something may happen with Andrias' misuse of the Calamity Box and the portals being open throughout space-time. Somehow, this may cause the gravitational pull around Amphibia to be thrown out of whack, causing the moon to come crashing down. Or maybe Andrias, or the core, juiced up on Calamity power, will just pull a Thanos and throw the moon at Anne, Sasha, and Marcy. Or maybe the moon represents the nuke Mr. X is probably cooking up as we speak. With this vision overwhelming the frog, she collapses to her knees. Leif is quick to inform Andrias that if they continue to abuse the music box, it'll be the end of Amphibia as we know it. Leif pleads her case to Aldrich, and one of the many frogs in Aldrich's court is wearing Stan's fez from Gravity Falls. 2 references in 1 episode, baby! Before responding, the core seems to scan Leif through Aldrich's crown, or perhaps he was consulting the core for information. Either way, he retorts that Leif is spouting the same nonsense as the Ohms, refusing to relinquish control of the box or ceasing the invasion, dismissing Leif and trying to convince Andrias that she's nothing more than a traitor. It's clear that Aldrich views Andrias as someone who lacks what it takes to be a true leader, refusing to put faith into a son that hasn't proven himself worthy. This strained relationship has lingered right into the present day, driving Andrias' bitter behavior as he sinks lower and lower, desperate to earn the approval of someone who will never be proud of him. Leif and Andrias, despite being at odds, do their best to smooth things over with one another. But knowing what's at stake, Leif doesn't hesitate to betray Andrias by stealing the key from his pocket. It isn't long before Andrias realizes this, and a chase ensues. Leif doing her best to get the box far, far away from the Leviathan family. Running through the castle, they pass by numerous life forms that are contained in jars, including a shadowfish, Sonic, and Tails. Morbid. Andrias whips out his blade in an attempt to stop Leif, who liberates a Mossman to escape, the same Mossman that Anne and Wally would encounter in their titular episode back in season 1. Andrias and Barrel are too late. Leif is long gone, escaping to the Ohms with the hopes of consulting them and figuring out a way to prevent the terrible future presented before her. Leif's escape with the box here was traumatic for Andrias. He was betrayed by someone he loved, and in the process, he lost everything. His father's respect, his family's legacy, Amphibia's golden age, all of it came to an end because of who he put his trust into. Obviously, Leif is doing the right thing, but you can still really feel for Andrias here. And it's that trauma, Andrias failing to stop Leif with his sword in hand, that drove him to see red in true colors. Getting jumped by Grime with Barrel's Warhammer must have already thrown him for a loop, as I speculated in my big breakdown of the episode, a video you should rewatch now that you have the context of this episode. But alongside Sprig being the displaying image of Leif, fueling Andrias' hatred further to the point that he tried to drop Sprig out of a window, MARCY'S stealing the box caused Andrias to relive this chase all over again, prompting him to finish the job at MARCY'S expense. Days later, Aldrich reports that the Calamity box is no longer on Amphibia, meaning Leif traveled to Earth, but the core informs Aldrich that Ohm prophecy states the box will return, so they will just have to wait to restore their glory. In anger, Andrias forms a strong prejudice against frogs, claiming their kind need to be kept in line. The present-day hierarchy, where newts reign supreme while toads oppress the frogs, is a direct result of Andrias' rage. He also is quick to dissolve his friendship with Barrel, assigning him to defend villagers far away from Newtopia. And I imagine Barrel became bitter, also contributing to the present-day state of the dynamic between frogs, newts, and toads. What I adore about this scene is how Zeno Robinson does his best Keith David impression, driving home how much Andrias is switching up on everyone. This betrayal stung and affected him deeply, Andrias proceeding to tear up the portrait in a fit of rage. In present day, Andrias remembers Leif's words as he turns to Darcy, who finishes their optimization. Now, the text here translates to memory wipe in progress, but editor Andrew Scorsini clarified on Twitter that the message was supposed to be optimization in progress. So yeah, MARCY'S still there, but how much of MARCY is still there is what we're left to figure out. After rebooting Darcy, MacBook startup sound included, Andrias asserts that he's ready to invade Earth, prompting Aldrich to respond from within the core that he's almost proud of Andrias. Almost. As if the borderline child murder and everything else wasn't enough. And with that, the episode comes to an ominous close. As always, we want to know what you guys thought about this episode. What do you think lies in store with Andrias and Darcy? Do you think there's anything left to tell with Leif's story? Let us know in the comments down below, or keep the conversation going over on Twitter and Instagram, at OstricVox and at Roundtable Vids. Give us a follow. Be sure to check out Toon Drip, and if you enjoyed this video, please sure to like and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great cartoon content. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. See ya!